Welcome to The Explainer. We're jumping right into something completely different today. We are stepping into a story that is just utterly bleak, brilliantly constructed, and visually striking. We're looking at a grim, dark fable all about the inevitable, catastrophic doom of Valhalla. Today, we're going to break down the tragic journey of the Dark Elf, the cosmic collapse of the world tree, Yggdrasil, and the devastating mechanics of how the gods accidentally engineered their very own apocalypse. It's a dark, epic myth that teaches us a lot about the profound danger of building systems on rotten foundations. The way the source material structures this downfall is honestly nothing short of fascinating. Let's get into it. To really feel the weight of this story, just listen to this authentic stab rhyme parable from our sources. It goes, binding the blood oath, blight of the branch, ledger of lightning, locked in the bone, meat of the master, mocking the might, sucking the storm breath, sinking in night. Okay, so that piece is called The Meat of the Master, and wow, does it ever capture the grim curse of our tragic protagonist. It tells us right away we aren't dealing with your typical triumphant hero's journey here. We are dealing with a binding parasitic curse. So, what's driving this whole nightmare? It's a central mechanic known as the parasitic blood oath. Think of this as a metaphysical cinders contract. And what makes this so devastating is that it physically tethers the transfigured Dark Elf's life force directly to the rotting roots of the world tree, Yggdrasil. This isn't just some abstract magical promise, you know? It is a literal, unbreakable, biological, and structural tether. This bond guarantees that the elf's life force is directly tied to the stability of Valhalla itself, which means any damage done to the elf acts as a direct strike to the very foundation of the world. Picture this scene. The shadow god Alutgard is absolutely sneering at the sovereign god Wotan, mocking him with the line, "A ledger of your debts written in meat and lightning." Just think about how brutal that imagery is for a second. The Dark Elf, who was once an artisan, has been violently transfigured into a fleshy, living accumulation of the gods' own gold greed and their broken treaties. He is the physical, walking embodiment of their sins, carrying the fate of their entire kingdom in his very bones. To truly understand the internal torment the elf is going through, you have to imagine a vessel being constantly, relentlessly consumed from the inside by two warring divine poisons, Donor's lightning and Lutgard's shadow. He isn't just carrying a heavy burden, he is actively being destroyed from within by these immense, conflicting energies. And because of that parasitic blood oath we talked about, as he's being consumed from the inside, the world tree's foundation is structurally compromised along with him. He essentially acts as a vacuum, sucking the oxygen right out of Donor's own storms. Because of this horrific torment, the Dark Elf embarks on what the sources call the inverted journey. It's a brilliant subversion of classic mythology. Instead of a hero ascending to the heavens or conquering some grand mountaintop, this is a metaphysical descent. We are guided down, deep into the dark, decaying, poisoned bowels of the world tree. The focus shifts entirely away from the shining halls of Valhalla above and forces us to look at the rotting, fragile roots below that are desperately holding it all up. And deep down in those roots, we meet the true architect of the apocalypse. Listen to our second stab rhyme parable, the serpent's sliding snare. Sliding of serpent, silver and snare, guide of the gloom walk, gnawing the root. Inverted the journey, into the ash, venom of Nibelung, veiled as the light. This introduces the creeping, inevitable dread of Nidhogg, the great serpent. Nidhogg is just down there in the ash, endlessly, patiently gnawing at the roots. Now this creates a really profound philosophical contrast. On one side we have the tragic vessel, the bound Dark Elf. He is entirely a victim, suffering under the weight of the god's debts, bound completely against his will. But on the other side, we have Nidhogg the serpent, who acts as the villainous guide. Nidhogg isn't bound at all. He is a constant, undestroyed presence who is actively choosing to chew away at the foundation. One suffers the apocalypse, while the other physically manifests it. This brings us to a terrifying mechanical concept, sympathetic destruction. Because the elf is permanently tethered to the root, and Nidhogg is perpetually destroying that root, an inescapable trap is formed. The elf's internal suffering directly mirrors the external collapse of the world. Every single bite Nidhogg takes out of the wood of Yggdrasil tortures the flesh of the Dark Elf, and conversely, any violence inflicted upon the elf damages the tree. It is a brilliant, brutal, and totally inescapable loop of agony. Our third parable, called the sympathetic strike, perfectly illustrates this fatal vulnerability. Strike on the shadow, shattering stone, hammer on hollow, hurting the heart, flesh of the fallen, foundation of fear, tearing the tree root,
Twilight is near. The gods literally engineered their own kingdom upon a foundation of fear and fallen flesh. They tied their immortality to a hostage they cannot even protect from the very serpent chewing at their floorboards.
So, what does this all mean for the gods? It means we are looking at a guaranteed system failure. Think about it. The elf is permanently bound. Nidhogg is perpetually destroying. The elf continuously drains the god's elemental power, and any physical blow to the elf shatters the foundation. The sources are showing us that the Goddard Demerung, the twilight of the gods, is not some tragic accident. It is a mathematical guarantee. The gods turn their own power against themselves by relying on this Cinder's contract. Which leads us to the timeline of the end, the ritual of ruin. The poetry outlines 4 distinct phases, starting with Wotan's spear of the sovereign and the blood of a bright one. But I need to add a crucial caveat here. Our actual underlying historical sources don't contain any mention of this magic spear or light elf blood resurrecting the serpent. This tells us these ritual elements are likely later embellishments invented by the gods themselves to make their doom sound a bit more heroic and purposeful than it actually was. In reality, the dread comes simply from Nidhogg's constant destruction, triggering a desperate, fatal panic response from the gods. Let's look at the final Stabraim parable, the altar of the ash. Spear of the sovereign spilling the seed. Blood of the bright one bringing the beast. Thunder and trickster tangled in ties, waking the wormlord, withered the skies. Now, while the poem dramatically sings of the sovereign's spear and spilled seed, remember what we just talked about. The raw source material strips this mythology away. Nidhogg isn't literally resurrected from death by a magic spear. He's always been there, undestroyed. This weakening is just a poetic embellishment for his fatal gnawing finally reaching the core. The skies wither simply because the foundations are giving way. And here is where the tragic irony hits its absolute peak. Donar, the god of thunder, desperately intends to purge this bound blight, the dark elf, with his hammer, hoping to save Yggdrasil with one massive cleansing strike. But the reality of the Cinder's contract ensures the exact opposite happens. Because of that blood oath, the hammerfall doesn't cleanse anything. Instead, it violently ignites the fused energy of the oath, rapidly accelerating the world being swallowed in soot. Try to picture the sheer terror of this ultimate backfire. Dornar, probably screaming a desperate prayer to the heavens, swings his mighty hammer in a blind panic to stop the root rot. The hammer connects, physically crushing the dark elf, who, remember, is already overflowing with volatile divine poison. Then, sympathetic magic activates instantly. Because the elf is the root, the ultimate attack of a god transfers directly into Yggdrasil's roots. Dornar's own power becomes the exact spark that destroys his home. The result of this backfire? Absolutely apocalyptic. The sources describe the creation of something called the Thorn of Twilight. When Donner's hammer hits the oath-bound elf, the cosmic seed within the elf blossoms, but it doesn't grow into a beautiful new tree. No, it erupts into a massive, catastrophic spire of pure destructive energy. It shoots upward from the poisoned roots, violently piercing the clouds and shattering the golden halls of Valhalla entirely from below. So we've seen the tragedy of the Dark Elf, the relentless malice of Nidhogg, and the grim mechanics of the Blood Oath. It all leaves us with a dark philosophical parable to ponder. If your entire kingdom is built on a foundation of broken treaties and meat, isn't your desperate attempt to save it the very thing that destroys it? The gods tried to cheat their way to eternal power, and in doing so, hard-coded their own demise into the foundation of the world. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I hope this deep dive leaves you pondering the fragile roots of power long after the screen fades to black.